Hi everyone, thank you for joining us. I'm Lily and I am here with Brad, and we are in a very cool neighborhood showing you a lovely native landscaped yard because a lot of you might be wondering right in the middle of all this heat what you should be doing with your beautiful yards that are water savers but are starting to look maybe a little sad or a little overwhelmed or a little stressed. So Brad is going to talk to us. He's going to give us 5 maintenance tips on what to do in our water saver yards. Before I jump into questions, I want to remind you to swipe and share. Let others know that we are live. You can jump on and ask questions. We are once again doing a simultaneous broadcast on Periscope and Facebook, so thank you everybody for joining us. And I'm going to turn over here and have you start us off. Tell us about 5 maintenance tips, or in general.
Well, in general, and one of the reasons we liked this house was a lot of people are a little frightened of the term xeriscape. They think it's going to mean all rocks and cactus. And what we love about this house is you can see we still have a lawn. This is not rocks and cactus. This is a lushly planted water saver garden with a lot of plant material. This was the homeowners wanted a garden for butterflies and hummingbirds, and so you see a lot of color here, a lot of activity and texture, and not a lot of rocks.
And not a lot of rocks, that's true.
This garden was planted a year ago.
And this, wait, before you even jump into that, this yard, this is the turf, this is the lawn, and we do have a lawnmower here, but you could probably do this with a push mower or a weed eater. It's a tiny lawn. Huh?
This is a great lawn. This lawn is a pleasure to mow in summer because it takes about 30 seconds to mow this lawn.
And it's in the shade.
The rest of the landscape, these are native plants. A lot of them can take care of themselves. However, this garden was planted a year ago. A lot of these plants are not quite mature, and so the homeowners are questioning how to take care of it after a year, what to do. And so we're going to take a look at that too. I brought 5 tools, or five maintenance tips for any landscape in summer. Of course, you're going to be mowing and blowing. Yeah, that's for you, Lily. We brought a little sunscreen. Of course, you're going to take care of yourself while you do.
Make sure you stay hydrated and keep yourself well protected from the sun.
But once the lawn is finished, took 30 seconds, we're going to walk through the landscape a little bit. And you can see...
How often should native plants be watered in general?
So that's a great question. It depends on, to establish in general. In fact, they planted some new plants just this summer. We recommend Mark Peterson's 3-2-1 rule. For the first 3 weeks after planting, you're going to water 3 times a week. You need to keep plants that have just come out of little pots from drying out, and they can dry out in a day. So for the first 3 weeks, you'd expect to be watering, keeping them moist but not wet, 3 times a week. After that, you can start to cut back. The plants will begin to establish themselves. This is a Mexican petunia, Acadia ruellia. It's going to grow up to look like these. And you can see the homeowners were just trying to bring this end cap around into an empty spot here. This was planted about 5 weeks ago, so now it's being watered twice a week. And after this, until once a week for the rest of the season.
Now it does look a little stressed.
And it was planted in June, so this plant has been through some stress this summer. But it's beginning, you can see at this time of day, there are some leaves that we lost, but now the leaves are firm, they're turgid, and this plant is recovering. It's beginning to root out. This plant's in the shade. So things are different over here. So what the homeowners noticed on this house, this landscape was planted with a lot of wildflowers and spring perennials, so it was very colorful in May.
That's a really cool agave. It's an interesting spot. I like it there.
This is it's good that you mentioned that, because this is a very important spot. When the homeowners drive up in the driveway, she noticed this spot, which in spring was full of wildflowers. What happens to wildflowers in May?
They die back.
They turn brown, hanging with seeds. Those were cleared out, and she was left with a big empty spot and wanted something she could plant in June that would look good without having to water it every day.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like it's been recently watered.
This was watered, like agaves and yuccas can be watered when they're put in the ground, and then generally you may never touch them again. This is a great agave. A lot of agaves have thorns. This is an Octopus Agave, one of my personal favorites. And as I will show you, it's
Not spiky.
It's not spiky. It's a very lovable agave. And the great thing is that next spring, so those wildflowers will return to this spot. The agave won't mind. It's not going to be in the way. So the wildflowers will fill this up, and you'll have that display again next year.
Question.
You just have something to look at in July.
Question. When plants are stressed, do the leaves usually turn brown?
Plants express stress in a variety of ways. The leaves don't always turn brown. When the leaves are turning brown, that is stress. But you can see here what leaves often do is they'll curl. This is a Mexican olive. And this is a native Texas plant. Its home is Laredo in the Rio Grande Valley. This plant can take heat, but it's smart. In the afternoon, the stomatas will close, and the leaf will curl. And it's fuzzy on the bottom, so it protects. It closes up. It loses less moisture through the stomata, and it exposes less surface area to the sun.
Now the key is, you said in the afternoon, but it is 10:30 in the morning,
yes,
and these leaves are still curled. So is that a sign we should be looking at?
And that's a very good point, and that is the sign that these homeowners are following in their landscape. They're looking for plants that are still curled up in the morning. Now this is a Mexican olive, but as you see, this is planted in a difficult spot, and this may be a difficult spot for Mexican olive. It's in the driveway, doesn't have a lot of room for its roots. It's growing in concrete, so this is normally a very tough native that is under some stress here, and it's baking all day long. It's on concrete. Another one I wanted to show you that's doing the same thing is the salvia over here. And this is Victoria sage. This is the mealy blue sage. This is one of our area's Southeast Texas great contributions to world horticulture, the mealy blue sage, which is planted worldwide.
Wow.
Now you see what it's doing right now. The leaves are curling up. This is a plant that's under some stress. A lot of its neighbors are not. But this plant is a good target for some supplemental water.
Would it work for Southeast Texas?
Oh, absolutely. So if you ever go to Goliad or to the Mission there's fields of this growing.
So,
but it will, like a native plant, it will bloom less in summer, and it'll try to protect itself.
So let's reintroduce, because I think we've had some people join. So talk to us about who you are, what we're doing, and why we're out here today.
So I'm Brad Weir from Conservation at Saws, and we're looking at an example of a Watersaver landscape that was planted with natives a year ago, and at just summer maintenance tips for a new Watersaver landscape, or really for any Watersaver landscape in general. So we've covered mowing, blowing, sunscreen,
yes.
And now we're just looking at watering.
And so I guess, when do we decide if we're going to just continue to give a plant water and see if it recuperates, or when it's time to remove the plant or trim it?
So as a rule of thumb, a plant like this can use some extra water if you want it to be lush. It's a native, so it'll be happy to curl up and wait till September. But if you find yourself watering over and over, so you may have a plant in the wrong place. Like the Mexican olive we looked at, which in this case, this is a full-grown plant, which is having trouble adapting to that location.
Hey, Brad, do you do house calls?
Yes, be careful what you wish for. We do Watersaver consults. And we can come and we can go through your irrigation and your landscape in general. Now, a landscape like this it has a sprinkler system.
But instead of how do you get a consult?
You call 704-SAVE. 704-7283. And if you're a Saws customer, we'd love to come out and help you with your landscape, especially with the irrigation settings. This landscape has a sprinkler system. This was once, you can look behind you, but you can see how the houses were built in Inwood. It's all with sprinkler systems and big lawns. However, this sprinkler system doesn't have to be run continuously. Certain subjects can be picked that need extra water. Wow. You can see, does the rosemary need extra water?
No water for the rosemary. Looks beautiful.
How's the skullcap doing? Little curled, but here's a tough plant. And this is a great plant that was planted this summer. This is actually Antelope horn milkweed. The customers wanted to have a butterfly garden, and this is the plant that monarch butterflies will be laying their eggs on. They exclusively use milkweeds. This was planted.
White spots on this side. I wonder if that's anything.
If that's a seed.
Who knows?
Or an egg.
Or an egg, maybe?
Well, it is. I don't know whose egg.
Yeah, I know.
So,
That's interesting.
so it's interesting that here is that milkweed's, this is planted in full scorch, but it's receiving a little shade in the morning from the rosemary. So unlike the salvia that's right behind it, this plant isn't under as much stress.
So the salvia, let's say we're going to water, we're going to try to get it a little lusher, but it can probably withstand the heat.
Oh yeah,
But then
it'll curl up in return.
Some more spent-looking stuff over here.
And these we wanted to look at, and this is spent. This is actually showy evening primrose. This is Mexican primrose. It's pink flowers, great spring plant, but by this time of year, this is spent.
Yes.
Different options available to you are to cut it back. But in this case, these can easily be pulled. These are wildflowers, and they're going to be back next spring. So in fact, their seeds are scattering right now. So in a Watersaver garden, you can easily, especially if you're using wildflowers, these can be removed after a certain point, just to.
And if this is another bare spot, once you're done removing it, and you want some architectural kind of interest, it might be another candidate for an agave.
For an agave, which is an agave or a yucca, which you can plant without having to worry about, and it'll give you some architecture.
Perfect. Now show off your cool tools. What are the recommended pruning, trimming tools?
So we've talked about weeding, just pulling spent wildflowers. My favorite tool for the Watersaver garden is right here. And let's find a subject. This is a hand clipper, hand pruner.
Okay, hand pruner.
As a rule of thumb, Watersaver plants are going to do very well. They're going to get big and lush, and it's okay to reduce them in size. And this is a good time to do it. This plant is fall aster. It's going to bloom in the fall. Until then, it can be shaped, and this is a good time before the rest of the growth to reduce its size if you need to. And this will be spectacular in fall. As a rule of thumb, you're just going to never cut off more than a third of any native plant this time of the year.
Okay. Too much stress on it otherwise.
Yeah, this is July. This is a tough time to be alive and standing outside all day. But you can easily cut off a third.
And when
of especially sages, lantanas, skullcaps can be reduced by a third.
And we're not damaging the future blooms by doing that.
You want to be careful. You do. That's a good point. Okay. But generally, these plants bloom so lushly that they're gonna grow. They're gonna grow a lot more before they bloom in the fall. So it will recover. The classic plant that is cut back by a third is autumn sage. And salvias and sages in general, they're great because they're big, sloppy plants. They make a big mess in the landscape, bloom with huge color when they're happy. But to prune, you just gather it up and cut off a third.
Easy enough.
And it smells good.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're
that
clocking
rue?
that. That is rue.
And Lily's favorite rue.
Really? I mean, this is a fun plant just to talk about. So why is this your favorite plant?
Well, so rue, I don't know if you remember, is actually a plant that grew right outside my back door.
Okay.
And so I grew up watching the really funny caterpillars with the weird horns or whatever on it. I just remember the caterpillars on that plant.
So yeah, they love rue. Swallowtails will lay their eggs on a rue or any citrus, and rue is actually citrus. So we have citrus behind us. There is a funny thing. I'm glad you mentioned that plant because it was planted here because this is a butterfly garden. The funny thing about rue, this is the plant. This is actually a European plant. It was used to make holy water. In summer, this is a very oily plant. And I would not stick my hands into rue in summer because it can cause dermatitis to get that oil all over yourself.
That's really good to know.
It's a good plant for your gloves.
Rue in
yes.
the summer.
Especially because it's going to be covered with butterfly larvae anyway.
Okay, perfect. All right.
Let's see. One more tool I wanted to show you in my holster. And this is a soil knife. Weeding is going to be an issue in any landscape in summer. And we have a weed over here, which is very common in any irrigated landscape. Do you recognize this yet? Well, that's nuts.
Looks like grass.
Looks like grass. It typically grows in your lawn. This is nutsedge. It's purple leaf nutsedge, a big pain in any lawn. But if you have a soil knife, So you can easily remove the nut. So just pulling this plant wouldn't be enough, because you'd be leaving the nut in the ground.
And those kind of throw those little nuts out and grow as runners, or how do they grow?
So they're all connected underground like a spider web.
Yeah.
So
That's why they're so hard to get rid of.
the two big weeds in this garden, in this shady garden, have been Nutsedge, and for these customers, ligustrum. But Lauren is very good about finding the ligustrums.
She gets rid of them.
So, but this is an easy way, whereas if you were trying to remove weeds with a shovel, shovels are hard to get into the ground. A soil knife goes right in. It has a small surface area.
So that we can see it. I mean, it's kind of cool. It's a serrated edge.
So you cut with it.
A little, what would you call the little divot in the middle part there?
I don't have a name for that, but what
Okay.
shall we call that?
But it helps remove the weeds.
Yeah. There's a lot of tools here.
Yes, absolutely. Well, if you want to head on over here, we'll wrap up and let everybody know where they can find us.
So again, I'm Brad. This is Lily, and from Conservation at Saws.
And we are so glad you joined us today. We hope you learned a little bit about how to maintain your Watersaver landscape. We'll have an article on gardenstylesa.com, and you can always find great information about landscaping and water conservation and plants that are ideal for this area on gardenstylesa.com or on saws.org. So hope you join us again next Thursday at 10:30 a.m.